There are a number of problems which can create bias in your questionnaire responses. Bias is a skew or a systematic error. So it means that the responses people give will somehow be systematically off the mark. They will not be giving accurate responses, and that will be consistent from person to person. The first reason that can make this happen are leading items. A leading item is an item that kind of pushes the person to give a specific type of response. So here's an example. Let's say a workout guru does a questionnaire that he attaches to his CDs, and he wants to collect data this way so that he can cite later on that this many percent of people liked the DVDs that they watched. So imagine that there is an item like this. Would you recommend my super effective workout DVD to your friends? What's leading about this item? And I think you already know the answer. It's suggesting inside the wording of the item that the DVDs are super effective. So it's kind of pushing you to say, yes, I would recommend these. So the way that the item is worded kind of pushes the person to give affirmative response to it. That's one problem, and you may notice, as you may remember, as we were talking about earlier on about the multi-item measures, and you saw that some statements were phrased in a favorable way, some were phrased in an unfavorable way toward a person on the interpersonal attraction scale. One of the reasons why that is done is to avoid creating this impression that we're pushing a person in one direction toward providing one type of response. So statements that are favorable are counterbalanced by the unfavorable statements so that you don't have this leading items effect. The next problem is the so-called item order effect. This happens where, and it can happen, it actually happens always, but we have ways to kind of neutralize this problem. People don't immediately forget the question or item that they just responded to when they move on to the next one. They remember it, and what they said or what they were asked about in an earlier stage of a questionnaire may later influence their responses to other parts of the questionnaire. So for instance, if you ask a person first about what their racial background or ethnic background is, and they answer that question, that idea that they are a member of a certain racial group may make them think about other things in the questionnaire in racial terms. So for example, if it is a political questionnaire and it's asking a person about their opinion about a party or about a president and so on and so forth, depending on what racial and ethnic group a person is, they may respond differently. Now, because we made the race salient, we brought it up, and it made them think about race first. So you always need to begin by asking people about those changeable, unstable things. And after this, you can ask about things that don't change from one moment to the next. So, for example, things that people do usually. The number of hours of television that a person watches per week, or the frequency with which a person contacts their best friend. Those are examples of things that are not going to change really regardless of where you put them in the questionnaire. So to give you an example, let's say you are looking at the relationship between reading celebrity magazines and a person's level of body image and distortion, for example. So the extent to which a person thinks that they are not skinny enough. the body image distortion items should come first, because that may be changing from 1 minute to the next. And then you should ask about exposure to celebrity magazines and not the other way around. The next problem that happens frequently with surveys is the so-called social desirability effect. This is a situation where a person wants to appear in a positive light, and so they're going to give a response that is not necessarily honest, but it just isn't controversial, or it makes them look good. I'll give you an example here. Let's say we have an item like this: I am an honest person, agree strongly, disagree strongly. Now, how many people are willing to admit that they're not honest? They're not that many people. And you know what's really curious is that people will distort these responses in a socially desirable way, even if nobody is looking at them or filling out the questionnaire, even if they're doing this in the privacy of their own home and they're doing this alone. Nobody's watching, nobody knows their names. Even in that situation, social desirability effect happens. Another group of concepts that are very vulnerable to social desirability effect are racial attitudes. Imagine what a person would say if you asked them if they are racially prejudiced or if they are a racist. That would probably not get you a lot of affirmative responses, because most people simply don't consider themselves racist. And even if they do, they most likely wouldn't tell you. So this really isn't so much a matter of how you write your questionnaire, but what you are trying to measure. Some concepts and some variables inherently are very difficult to measure using the survey method, because people will not want to honestly tell you what they think about a given thing. Another example would be asking some very personal questions about sexual preference, or how likely somebody would be to cheat on a significant other when given an opportunity. Once again, what is amazing is that people give these socially desirable responses even if nobody is watching. The last source of bias that we will talk about today is what we call acquiescence response set. This means a person's tendency to agree. We have a natural tendency to agree with other people because we are social creatures and we are used to living in groups. And if you live in groups, if you live with other people, with family, surrounded by friends, by co-workers, you have to be an agreeable person. You have to go along many times. So it is sort of natural for us to tend to say, yes, I agree with you, rather than I disagree with you. Acquiescence response set is one reason why we include positively and negatively worded items, or favorably and unfavorably worded items, in questionnaires, because items like these will help people sort of snap out of this blind tendency to circle agree strongly, or just circle in the upper range of the response set. And so you can see here the first item is favorably worded favorably. The second one, the third one, and the fourth one is worded unfavorably. And once again, the fifth one is worded favorably. And so, you know, if you tend to agree strongly with the first item, you should disagree with the other item. And people filling out questionnaires like these, if they have been suffering, because some people have a stronger tendency, some people have a weaker tendency to agree in general. If they have a strong tendency to agree, they will notice this. if you have these items that are worded in different ways, because they will be forced to think about the response options that are giving in order to represent their response. So this is sort of a natural thing. Again, it's not really the problem with the way you design a questionnaire, but you can design a questionnaire like here by varying the wording of statements so that people really have to think about what they should be circling when they record their response. And this will snap them out a little bit of this tendency to agree. All of these, like I said, can skew the responses that people give you. And so they make your measures that you are using inaccurate. And this affects what we call validity. Validity is very simply the accuracy of your measure. Now, if you have these problems happening in your questionnaire is off the mark. It's missing the true levels of whatever variables you're measuring, because people are not giving you the accurate responses, and all of these responses are sort of off the mark. This is an issue with validity. So it's really important whenever you are designing a questionnaire to ask yourself, look at this list here and ask yourself, am I going to have any one of these problems in my questionnaires?